In September of 1986, an incident occurred in the city of Tacoma where 5 officers, 3 white males, 1 Hispanic male, 1 white female officer, responded to the scene of a large, violent black male, an EDP, emotionally disturbed person, who had violently assaulted a female. They arrived at the scene to find a subject 6 feet 5 inches tall, 230 pounds, armed with a large butcher knife in his dominant hand, armed with a 2-foot club in his less dominant hand. As the officers attempted to array themselves around him in a controlling posture, he began to lash out violently. The responding sergeant, who had drawn his weapon, was approximately 6 feet away when the subject lunged at him with the knife. This officer fired 1 shot from his Beretta service pistol. It was later determined that this round, a 9mm Winchester Silvertip, had struck the subject in the heart. The man appeared to be startled, looked at the officer, and then violently lunged at him again with renewed vigor. And in the seconds that followed, the other 4 officers joined the first in firing. A total of 20 shots were fired before the suspect was neutralized, 8 of them striking the subject. The community, not understanding what a trained policeman knows about the dynamics of violent encounters, felt that it was a gross abuse of law enforcement use of deadly force. They felt that 5 officers at the scene should have been able to control a man with what they perceived as a lesser weapon. Fortunately, all those officers had had the training in the Tueller drill. And my recollection, having seen the paperwork, is that at least 3 of them made the statement in their initial reports. It was fresh in my mind from my training how rapidly that man could have closed the distance and killed the sergeant or the rest of us. We knew for this reason it was necessary. We contrast that with situations like New York versus Frank Magliato in New York City, Manhattan Superior Court, 1984. Magliato was a citizen with a gun permit, attacked for the 4th time that night by a violent junkie with a long history of criminal assaults who was armed with a 2-foot club. Magliato fired, his bullet struck and killed the suspect. It was testified in court that that man was within 2.08 seconds, based on subsequent tests, of crushing Magliato's skull. Magliato, with the jury out of the room, was asked by the judge, "Did you know that at the time the weapon fired?" Magliato answered no, and the judge said, "Because you did not know that, it was not part of your mindset, it was not part of your decision-making process, the jury will not know this." And a jury that didn't know this kid was 2 seconds away from death found him guilty. Guilty indeed of depraved murder. The New York State Supreme Court reduced that to a conviction for manslaughter. He remains, however, in Dannemora State Penitentiary, essentially for no other crime but being unable to justify what was clearly a justifiable shooting. The video training is good. Interactive role-play training that becomes a part of the officer's experience is better. I'm going to urge that you do this with every single one of your officers. And the way we do it at LFI is this. We break you up into groups of 3. Obviously, those with recent leg injuries are exempted. We'll have each of you take at least 1 turn playing each of 3 roles. The knifer can either use a rubber knife like this or simply the tip of the index finger. Obviously, we're not going to use real weapons in any case. He will pace off to 7 yards. And as Dennis said, on his signal, because in real life the knifer doesn't have to react to someone else's signal, the officer has to react to his self-initiated assault. When he lunges forward, the next man, the timer, will start the time. He will stop the time when the knife touches the 3rd man, the defender. The defender will stand his ground, an empty hand, no prop weapons, ask himself how rapidly he could draw, whether or not, like a Star Wars phaser pistol, is going to instantly stop the man, or whether, like the Tacoma incident, the guy's going to take a round in the heart and keep going until he's hammered into the ground. When this man starts the lunge, the time starts. When he touches, it stops. When you're playing the role of the knife man, don't do like this. Don't go. In real life, they're going to come through you like a steamroller. Run past him full speed and touch as we go by. And the martial artists in the crowd, no palm heel strikes, okay? For obvious reasons, make sure you have a clear path and can steer for the open sea and don't run into another interactive team doing the same on the other side. What I want you to do after that, designate 1 man in each 3-man team as the record keeper. He will take a record of the height, weight, age, and sex of each of the participants and how long it took them to execute the technique. When the crew is all back together, have each recorder read them all aloud so they go into the notes. Remember, a policeman's notes from his training are discoverable evidence in court on both sides. He now has, if there are 8 men in the crew, 8 men on the shift, He now has in his training documentable that he's seen 8 different men of different height and weight and strength and speed and muscle tone execute this technique. We've seen people do it in a second flat. We've seen the ones who insisted on doing it with leg injuries still do it in 2 seconds from 21 feet. And we find, as Dennis did, the average person does it in about 1.4 seconds and change. Remember also with a long extended weapon, such as a long bludgeon, because you have an extra arm's length that cuts off one step, and the time is going to be even more rapid than that. And once the momentum is underway, once the man has overcome stasis, it will not be proportionally longer. Okay, if he's 40 feet away, it's not going to take 3 seconds double the other time. It's going to take about 2 seconds and a little bit of change, because once his momentum is going, it gains at a disproportionately rapid speed. We'll ask you gentlemen to do that now, and then when you go in a court, if they try to do to you what they did to Frank Magliato, you and any officer you're responsible for can say, "No, Your Honor, the reason I shot that man 20 feet away was because in my training I knew I was a second and a half from death. And I knew that because of my training. I did it to another man. In my training, another man did it to me. In my training, I stood back so I can see the forest for the trees and watched another man do it to another man. And by God, you can replicate that with the jury in the deliberation room so long as they know what they have to do when they're secluded in there. And I believe if you carry through Dennis's training, you may also have some people who have you as well as Dennis to thank for saving their careers and their lives. Thank you, gentlemen. Stay safe."